It's Friday on the Young Turks. Donald Trump is king. The sky is falling down. In fact, I think I see something else falling down. Drop it. I did my best. Anyway,
it's better than drop it.
Drop it. Yeah. Anyway, I'm Johnny DeRola, Michael Shore, Jimmy Dore. I love when the guest names rhyme. That makes it a lot smoother to do the intro. Welcome back, guys. We're about to close out week one of the new administration. How you feeling about our prospects for the next 4 years?
It's been a real wild, wacky ride so far, I'll tell you. It's a roller coaster of emotions. Mm-hmm. One day he repeals the TPP or kills it. Mm-hmm. The next day he takes away reproductive rights from poor women. It's fantastic.
You never know what you're going to get. You don't know.
No, you don't.
And he doesn't know what he's going to give either. So
yeah, I mean, what we'll get is whatever Bill O'Reilly tells him to do on his show at night. Because apparently he just tweets out everything he hears.
Did you see the tweet? Someone tweeted out
or
that
Steve Bannon,
Fox News and Friends said, hey, we have a camera on the White House. If you're watching, flick a light on and off. And he fucking did. Did you see that?
I heard that might not be true.
I heard somebody say so.
So it was a real news guy who tweeted it out. Fox News guy, I think. But at the same time, it was a real video, and there was so it could be at any time it happened.
Right.
Who knows when that happened? But there was someone turning a light off.
Okay, we're gonna look into that. It's at least while all this bad stuff is happening, we have some entertainment coming out of the White House. That's always good.
Yes, yes.
We do also have a lot of news. I mean, the nomination battles are going through. We're going to start off on that. We've got more fallout from some of the diverse executive orders that have been signed or are about to be signed coming out of Trump, and a little bit more on the normalization of torture. Get ready for that, America. But we're going to be starting off with the nominees. Education Secretary nominee Betsy DeVos is not having a good year so far. First, we had her nomination hearings, and those were an embarrassing debacle from beginning to end. And a lot of senators, mostly on the left, a little bit on the right, had some good questions that made clear how ill-prepared she is for the position. A little bit that came out of those hearings. DeVos was not aware of a federal law protecting the rights of students with disabilities, did not appear to understand a question about measuring school quality, and suggested that schools needed guns to protect students from grizzly bears. The Wyoming school she was referring to bans guns from its school campuses and instead uses a fence to keep bears away from students. So that's good. Maybe she should have advocated for more fences in schools. She also refused to say that she would enforce a 2011 guidance that uses a preponderance of evidence standard in investigations of campus sexual assault, which is the standard that activists for more investigation and accountability for sexual assault on campus want to be instituted. And as a result of all of this, last week, teachers and their allies protested against her nomination by gathering in front of schools in over 200 cities. And by the way, I only just found out about that today. So again, the media sucks. But that is a great organized opposition to her that we haven't really seen with a lot of the other nominees, even the other ones who are least prepared for their position. But coming out of all of that, the popular opposition and her poor performance, we now find out that the Democrats are going to oppose her nomination, and you're going to see that in this video.
She's someone that there's not going to be one Democratic vote for her, and we're trying to find Republicans who will vote against her because she's an ideologue who knows next to nothing about education policy, as we demonstrated, or she demonstrated really, in her confirmation hearing. Price, he's unacceptable. I mean, there's going to be a lot of these nominees who we're going to do everything we can to defeat. As you know, these nominees need 51 votes, and we have 48. So we need some Republicans to defeat somebody. But you will see Pruitt, you'll see a number of these nominees who will, virtually all of us will oppose them. And I'm sure the same, I'm sure it's true with DeVos. I'll bet you it's true with Price.
So that's good to hear, at least on this nominee, not on some of the previous ones. There is going to be opposition. It might not be enough, but what do you think about the likelihood that she will be barred from taking over the Department of Education?
There's nothing to make you think that it's likely because of the numbers. But if any of them, going in, I thought there was going to be, they would have one or two that wouldn't make the cut because it was Trump, right? Because they would, even Republicans would come out. This one seems like it would be one on qualification that they might do that. The problem that you have is a problem we talk about here all the time, which is money in politics. That on the panel that is considering her nomination sit at least 4 Republican senators that she's been wildly generous with in campaign finance and in campaign donations. So you have this huge problem.
How is that
with
fucking
that.
possible?
Well, it's possible, but you should not be allowed to nominate someone such as this, or people who want to get into government should not be giving money that way, or they should be giving it to both sides if that's what they want to do.
Or if you've been given donations by a nominee, you should recuse yourself from their
well,
vote.
that's the last one. You should not be able to vote on this nominee if they've been giving you money. It's so simple to do that, right? Yeah. Susan Collins of Maine came out and she said who she is supporting. Absolutely. It's not a stellar list of people. She's a Republican from Maine. You're not going to agree with a lot of them. Omitted from that was Betsy DeVos's name. She didn't say she was going to vote against her, but was omitted from that list. That's just one.
Yeah, I read a couple for quotes.
And so, does she bring Lisa Murkowski along? Does she bring others along? Doubtfully. I mean, I don't see the out here for them. And DeVos is the most, the most reprehensible. I don't know if she's the most reprehensible. She's among the 15 most reprehensible nominees that he's put before the court. Yeah. I spoke today for about 71 seconds to a former U.S. senator who was getting on a plane allegedly, or just sitting at home and didn't want to talk to me. But we spoke. He was very. The question I had was, why are Democrats, he's a Democrat, why are Democrats going along with these nominees?
This is the question everyone wants to know, Michael.
A lot of people want to know. And you see Franken reacting to it now because they are getting flack for it. He gave a good answer. I mean, it's not an answer I'd necessarily like, one that you probably like less, but he said, we know in most cases the tradition of approving the nominees of a president generally means that you are going to get somebody like that person if you overturn them in reaction. So let's say you don't get DeVos. You might get someone like DeVos. I don't know if there are that many people that are like DeVos in that way. Mm-hmm. But if you don't get a lot of these people, let's say it's Pruitt, a little bit more of I guess a textbook. You're going to get somebody else come in who's just like Pruitt.
Yeah. Which is what Elizabeth Warren largely said about Ben Carson.
About Ben Carson. So that's what the Democrats do. That's what Republicans do often with Democratic nominees as well. I don't remember the last overturned cabinet nominee. Justice is sure, John Tower. For drinking, right? And that was something, and he was a colleague of the senator, so that was even worse. It was womanizing, it was drinking. So maybe there's something that jumps out that's horrible, but look at what this president did and what people allowed him to do. I think that. So he said, this senator said to me, it's as simple as that. Let's not waste our time on these people. Let's spend our time and use whatever capital. I'm not saying.
No, I'm not. I know. You're saying what he said.
I'm saying what he said. Let's use our capital to stop what they want to do later on and to highlight what they want to do and stand in the way of that. This senator said he thinks Republicans will be easier to bring along, some Republicans, on that part of it in some cases, not across the board at all, but in some cases that are important as this administration moves along. Yeah. That's the philosophy that they use.
And so they think that if they voted against the nominees, that would poison the well of the Republicans coming along with them later?
Well, two-part. One, that it would potentially poison the well, but also that it wouldn't actually get them anything better.
Right. But
because they can't nominate anyone.
But so what my point is
why not lose 51-48 each time?
Yes, so then you're on record, and now what you're doing is you're handing a mini victory to Trump, and now Trump can say later on, but you guys voted for these people. You all voted to confirm this. Now you're going to say he's not a good person because of this. You knew about that when you confirmed him. Yeah. How could you possibly be upset? So that's why it's so. There doesn't seem to be a downside. So if you're going to be the resistance and you're going to go along with all his cabinet picks, it's normalizing Trump's governing style, and it doesn't get you any goodwill with the Republicans. And by the way, what about making them pay the price for screwing over Barack Obama's Supreme Court pick for an entire year? There was zero price to pay for that. Barack Obama didn't make them pay a price for that, and the Senate Democrats aren't making them pay a price. There is no price to pay. They're still being pragmatic. Those same people who wouldn't allow Barack Obama to rightfully appoint a Supreme Court justice, They are now getting no price. Go ahead.
No, it's very angry. I was going to ask you, what price would you, first of all, the question you asked, right, is why not lose 51-40? That was my next question, but Senator the plane was taking off, right? But I mean, he was very kind, but I sort of didn't believe he was getting on a plane or sitting on a plane. It didn't have that kind of ambient plane noise, but he was really generous in talking, and I found it very interesting. What I was able to infer, though, was that the answer is yes, that you still save political capital. You do the right thing, quote unquote, what has been tradition, and the Senate is addicted to tradition. You do that for a moment, and then you fight later. The question is, they don't fight, right? I mean, where's the fight going to happen? Maybe this time, because of Trump, you're going to have Republicans who, when it comes to legislation, you're going to have people who want to oppose him, for a while within his own party, the first 100 days, all of that.
Someone strong like Marco Rubio.
But your question is great. Somebody strong like Marco Rubio. But did you see the guy holding a spine?
Yes,
yeah, that was so great,
that was
right?
fantastic.
What you said is true, though. And what could they have done about where's the retribution for the Supreme Court justice nominee? Like, how do they do that? Could they have done that yet? What could Obama have done then? What could he do? What could be done now? I wanted.
Well, we'll see on Thursday when he announces his
when he
Supreme Court
announces it.
pick.
I know. That's what I mean. I wanted to know what that was, right?
Yeah.
Because I couldn't come up with it, and I get really frustrated when I don't have an opinion about what to do. But I didn't know what the president could do. I didn't know what the Congress could do. It was lame duck. That stuff never happens in practical terms. But I was so angry about it,
So-
and I still am.
Well, what other people have told me who are, academics, that
What are you trying to say about me?
but is that Barack Obama never really understood the power of the bully pulpit. He never used it. He never hammered one idea, and he didn't make the Republicans. Not only did they not pay a price for opposing everything he tried to do since 2010, but they paid no price at the bully pulpit. So he didn't move people. He didn't make it an issue. He didn't make them answer for it constantly. They didn't have to pay a political price. There was no price to pay. And that's his job. You have to use the bully pulpit to make people pay political prices. That's really, the big thing that the president has.
I think you're right, but I think the numbers are the thing that they had. And
Right.
And this particular, in general, absolutely. I think Rahm Emanuel, being his chief of staff from the beginning, was the worst thing that Barack Obama did in office from the very beginning, because he took somebody who was toxic to the Hill immediately and strained relations, right? Because people just didn't like
we're going to work
when his strategy
together.
is we're going to work together.
Yeah.
So Rahm Emanuel was a mistake, in my opinion, from the beginning. But I don't, and I agree with what you're saying. But how? Like, what could he have done? I still don't know what it is. And you're not an academic, so I don't know why I'm asking.
Look, I do think we're going to see, hopefully, in the coming weeks when he nominates someone to the Supreme Court who, I mean, if the experience we've had so far this month is anything to go on, God knows where he's going to find this person or what they're going to believe, and it's going to be far more consequential, because whereas the heads of these departments are going to be wrecking our country for 4 years or so, unless some of them burn out or quit or whatever, whoever ends up on the Supreme Court could be there for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, theoretically. And so that's even more important. I agree with Elizabeth Warren. If you got rid of Ben Carson, you wouldn't get anyone better. That doesn't mean you shouldn't still vote against them.
I agree.
Especially when Ben Carson made clear that he is willing to give money to Donald Trump's family to build housing or whatever. And I read this editorial this morning on Vox from Matthew Iglesias, and he was saying, we're not giving the Democrats enough credit for the opposition that they are throwing up. And he pointed out differences between what's happening now and what happened under Barack Obama when he first came into office. He pointed out that then the Republicans actually largely voted unanimously to support Barack Obama's cabinet nominees. But that's because he was choosing PhDs, people with experience in the field, people who are not ideologically chosen because they're at 180 with the goal of that department. Rex Tillerson has no experience in diplomacy and appears to have been put in to get that $500 billion deal with Russia. Betsy DeVos wants to destroy public education. Ben Carson is going to hand off money to Donald Trump. Mateo said that Jesus Christ is the only solution for the problems of the world. These are people who are going to seriously imperil our country and its citizens. And like you said earlier, at the very least, if you vote against them, when they do these things, you can say, I was against this person from the start. If you vote for them now, then you are signing on for the terrible decisions that they make later on.
So, and let me just make one thing about Elizabeth Warren with Ben Carson. So her theory on voting for him, as you stated, was that she's afraid that she's going to get something worse than Ben Carson. So I'll go with you. No, you oppose it. If something worse comes, you oppose that too. And she referred to Ben Carson's statements, what he said about, gay people and transgendered and all the horrible things he said, that women who have abortions are worse than slave owners, stuff like all that stuff he said, right? She said, I've disagreed with his previous statements. No, you don't disagree with them. You condemn them.
Yeah.
You don't disagree with them. So this is, again, the weak, with spineless Democrats. And now, so I might get something worse. So I'm afraid of what Donald Trump might do later, so I'm going to go along with him now. They just screwed you over for a year and wouldn't give you a Supreme Court justice. And you can't even stand up against Ben Carson. What do you got, a sponge in your brain?
You can't stand up against him. He can't even stand up. And you need context. You disagree
He opposed
with
his own nomination.
Yes.
Exactly, preemptively. But anyway, look, for Betsy DeVos, the committee is scheduled to vote on her nomination on Tuesday, January 31st, which is important because, as Al Franken pointed out, they are looking for 2 or 3, depending on if the one that we think might theoretically go against her will. And so if you could bring up this graphic, it's the people, I think we threw one Democrat in there, but supposedly the Democrats are all opposed, where there are the Republicans who are also going to be voting. So if you live in one of those states...
Patty Murray's a Democrat.
That's why I said we accidentally threw one of the Democrats in there. But if you live in one of those states, or even if you don't, feel free to put as much pressure as you can on those senators to try to make clear that there will be a price to pay, if not from Senate, from the people.
I like Pat Roberts from Kansas. He won't take the abbreviation. Everybody else was Sen. Well, now it's gone now. So there it is. Pat Roberts, Senator Pat Roberts.
Senator Pat Roberts.
He doesn't. None
Makes
of that
no sense.
abbreviation bullshit. But yeah, get on the phone with these guys. Todd Young just won. He just got to the Senate. Tell him, get these people, because it's hard for him. He's from Indiana, Mike Pence, all that stuff. And there is this institutional respect that none of us on this panel, or none on the most right-wing Republican panel, are going to be able to break through in the Senate, which is this institutional respect, which is the tradition that is very, very hard.
But don't you think that all the Republicans showed no respect for the institution when they did to Merrick Garland what they did? Because they wouldn't even have a meeting with them.
I think that they found a loophole that they all jumped into, and it was so insulting and so hideous and so wrong and all of those things.
Yes.
But I think that they, in their own way, and I'm not even going to say the reasonable among them, because I don't think there was anybody who spoke about it reasonably, but they said, okay, so this is what the Senate says, and this is what we're going to do. You can find an argument for anything if you look at enough Senate precedent, and that's what they're trying to do. It's inexcusable. It's the worst thing that happened in the past year because of what it means going forward right now. And these senators, listen, I'll take a cabinet full of Ben Carsons as long as these senators stand up for the judicial nominees of Donald Trump. Stand up to them.
I think, look, that loophole I thought was ridiculous from the very beginning. Anybody who believes that they had a point doesn't understand the history of how these things go down, but it also lays out a path that the Democrats can take. If 9 months is too close to an election, when he nominates them on Thursday, just say, I think the people should have a say. I'm going to wait till the results of the next presidential election.
Yeah, right.
And by the way, if you think that's ridiculous, you didn't even win the popular vote. So the people didn't get a say on this. The states got a say, because we rule by geography, not by population, for some reason in this country. So just say, we'll find out in 4 years what the people think. Unfortunately, I'm worried about what's going to happen in 4 years, but we'll see.
Just one more quick point. We've talked about it. Joe Lieberman introducing Betsy DeVos. Again, another dagger in the back of the Democrats, right? Because here is the least qualified candidate for the cabinet, and even where Republicans are hinting they won't vote for her, but there is Joe Lieberman. I don't know if you remember who Joe Lieberman was. He was part of the last losing team that lost to George W. Bush. Yeah. Al Gore, in his Democratic Leadership Council wisdom, decided to put a right-winger as his vice president, who later on went to be on stage at the Republican convention in 2008, and now is introducing the worst ever education nominee, Betsy DeVos. That's Joe Lieberman, former Democratic vice presidential candidate. So now you know the rest of the story.
Yeah, and when you look at the history of healthcare, and somebody talked today about how Joe Lieberman, that the only concessions, they could only go so far with healthcare and the Affordable Care Act as far as Joe Lieberman would find tolerable, because he was the one, who's saying at each turn, no, we can't do that, we can't do that, we can't do, to Democrats. So he was flawed. The dynamics of that election can be discussed in other ways, because Gore was flat. Putting Lieberman on did give a bump, and the vice president doesn't matter. But he has shown his true colors by straying so far from the party. And when he was challenged by liberals, he never was able to get that chip off his shoulder, because you'll remember Ned Lamont
beat him in the primary.
Yeah, exactly. And he went and ran as an independent because he was popular in Connecticut. He won, but he never got over with the Democrats, and he never. And this is a perfect example of what he's doing. So it's
what was his party? Was it Connecticut for Lieberman?
It was an independent party. Yeah, I don't know.
He was my
know.
senator. That makes me sick.
There was only someone from Bridgeport next to us. We would be able to answer that question, but we don't know the name of that party.
Are you from Bridgeport, Jimmy?
I am not.
Anyway, okay, let's move on to something slightly different. Hidden amongst other high-profile executive orders signed by Donald Trump this week is a call for immigrant crime reports, which is a new thing I didn't know would be a thing, to be put out on a weekly basis. Here's a section from the executive order. To better inform the public regarding the public safety threats associated with sanctuary jurisdictions, the Secretary shall, on a weekly basis, make public a comprehensive list of criminal actions committed by aliens and the jurisdiction that ignored or otherwise failed to honor a detainer, which has an interesting two-part effect. One, you get to magnify and highlight disproportionately the crime being done by, from your point of view, a hated minority group in this country. You also get to shame a city for allowing crime to happen inside of its geographic boundaries. And so that's a useful thing for them to put out there. Now, this is coming at the same time that we're building the wall and we're setting up huge detention centers on the border. A number of other things were being done. But this one, in a way, in terms of it's just clear propaganda, clear racist propaganda, almost bothers me more. Because I knew that the wall was going to come. I didn't know that he's going to be putting together reports that Fox is going to be able to run 2-minute hates based on every single week going forward.
It's pure racism is what it is. Because if I'm in a sanctuary city and I commit a crime, right, doesn't matter.
Does your
right?
name get on the list?
My name doesn't get on the list
No.
because I'm white. And so there's no, it is exactly what you just said. It's propaganda, but it's racism before it's anything else. It's the us versus them constantly. And I think it's the ugliest thing, and this is all, let's just keep in mind, from that inauguration speech to the executive orders to this kind of bullshit, this is all Steve Bannon. This is his signature. He won the election for Donald Trump. He did a really good job at putting that campaign together when it was falling apart with Manafort and Lewandowski. He did a really good job. I mean, objectively speaking, that guy is coming in to fix my car. I hate that guy, but he's the Nazi fixed my car. That's what this is. That's what happened here. And so when you see this stuff, this is Bannon. This is the Breitbart influence. And this
which is on the speech,
which,
too,
exactly.
speech.
Yeah, which is on the, that was a nationalistic speech, right?
Yeah.
And then you have, we're going to get to more Bannon later, but that's consistent with all this other stuff.
Yeah.
How can we accept this? I mean, how can, these are American cities being villainized by the government, almost like they're sending spies in there to report. That's what they did in the 60s in the civil rights movement. The FBI and Hoover's people would send people into the towns in Mississippi to see what sheriffs were being good to black people and report on police officers and sheriffs who were not following what the white citizens councils wanted and reporting it back to the FBI. Yeah. This is what essentially a report on that. I mean, modern day.
So so this kind of stuff doesn't play. It only plays with that 36%, 33%, right? Yeah. So he's already, I can't get over the fact that Donald Trump already has lower numbers than George Bush did after Katrina. Yeah. Right? So think about that. And then there was a wipeout in 2008 for the Republicans in the Congress, Senate, and the White House, right? We elected a black guy. So this kind of stuff is it should make a bloodbath in 2018 for the Republicans. It should make the Republicans have to run away from Donnie Tanahans. But if we see... Well, if we see the Democrats finding ways to screw it up, I'm going to vote for Ben Carson. I'll go along. I can do this. This is the kind of thing. This is where Bernie Sanders really needs to lead hard, I think.
Well, I mean, there's one thing that's working against them. I mean, that may be more true in 4 years, but in 2 years, by the numbers, this election that just passed was the opportunity to pick up seats.
Because of
This one,
gerrymandering.
exactly. But this one that's coming up, they have to defend way more seats than they have the opportunity to pick up. And so even if he's dragging people down, it's going to be very hard just in terms of the schedule of what's coming up in 2 years. It's going to be very difficult.
It's going to be, numbers, John's right there. The numbers are really daunting.
Yes.
But that being said, that there's going to be something vogue, we would presume, to go against this president on the parts of Republicans. You can be sure that Republicans, you can see it in Evan McMullin now, but you're going to see names that are much more familiar.
John McCain
John
already
McCain and Lindsey
indicated.
Graham, but those are sort of old news type of people. I don't think they register.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that, they're yesterday's Republican Party too. But you're going to have people that are going to want to get away from this president, and I think that that's going to be more of a challenge. And you also remember that they struggled to get Russ Feingold in the Democrats in this year, where Clinton did better than Feingold did, and these numbers which is bizarre. And the same thing happened in another Senate election where Clinton outdid. I can't think of it
Virginia?
right now. No, it wasn't Virginia that I'm thinking of, and it may have been, but it was. In any case, it doesn't matter right this second. But the point is that there are ways of getting into this electorate that they're going to have to go about in a different way.
Let's return to the immigrant numbers, though, because I do want to point out one or two things. First of all, the hypocrisy that I already see people defending this. I did a story on my channel about this already, and people are saying, oh, we just want the information. We just want the information. These are the same people who don't think that police departments should have to report how many people they shoot, unarmed people they shoot. That's why we don't have that information. This is coming from the same side of the aisle that says that the CDC should be barred from researching gun violence. All of a sudden, they just want the numbers. Well, we already understand basically how this is going to go down. The Immigration Policy Center looked at data dating back over 1 century and concluded that native-born Americans are more likely to be incarcerated than Central American immigrants, and recent increases in immigration occurred as crime actually fell in the U.S. This is a fact that we've repeated over and over. They are less likely to commit crimes, and they go into why that might be. The reporter's authors wrote, "It's hardly surprising since immigrants come to the U.S. to pursue economic and educational opportunities not available in their home countries and to build better lives for themselves and their families. These are people who are motivated to improve their lives, not to commit crimes. Also, they're far more worried about being caught for even minor crimes and being shipped out of the country. And so we shouldn't be surprised that the numbers show that they commit crimes at actually lower rates." And by the way, this reminds, a lot of people have made this connection. This reminds me of something else, and this might tie back to the Bannon thing. If you could bring up this next graphic. You're going to see the former black crime section of Breitbart. They had a black crime section. I looked for the white crime section, wasn't able to find it. It's weird. I looked for the redhead crime section, wasn't able to find it. But they did have black crime because they want to context-free fearmonger about certain groups that they want you to hate and fear. And
that's where the brilliance. That's where like Steve Bannon. He has a certain. Brilliance as far as things go. I guess getting Donnie Tanahan's elected, you got to say that guy had something on the ball. But this is where this blind spot. I mean, this stuff does not play with most Republicans. It doesn't play with most independents, and it certainly doesn't play with Democrats. So, again, this is they're giving them these are self-inflicted wounds. You already have the people who this appeals to, is my point. Like the people who that appeals to, they already love you. They already know that you hate blackies, right? They don't need that more.
But could this be to inoculate them against where on the economic policies, like bringing in all the Goldman Sachs advisors and all of that, that would turn off a lot of his voters. But if you distract them with a bunch of, hey, look at these brown people, they're really scary. Look at they killed someone in San Jose.
Maybe that is it.
Yeah.
I don't know. But we also have, and this is sort of tied into it, it's a part of a broader strategy. This is what Donald Trump was saying. I think this was with Muir just earlier this week. Said, talking about Chicago, it was brought up how he wants to send the feds in. He said, so far they've been unable to curb the city's murder rate. It's been going on for years, and I wasn't president. So look, when President Obama was there 2 weeks ago making a speech, very nice speech, 2 people were shot and killed during his speech. You can't have that. You also didn't have that because the Tribune confirmed that the Chicago Police Department that no shootings occurred during Obama's speech. But he just says it because he wants you to be scared of Chicago. He wants you to be scared of stereotypical inner cities. He will make up murders to support his position, and nobody can even figure out where he got that misinformation from. It wasn't on O'Reilly, and I don't think it was being spread on Breitbart. He's just making up out of whole cloth literal murders going on during speeches. And my worry, really, is that I agree with Jimmy that I think that this goes too far for a lot of people in America. My fear, though, and we'll get into this a little bit more when we do the Bannon thing later on, is I went over a poll showing people's views of the crowd size at the inauguration and things like that. People have become so, again, I'll use the term inoculated against facts and against reality. They just want to believe that when you showed them the two pictures of the inaugurations and you had the name, this is Obama's, this is Trump's, which one has more people in the picture? And 15% of Trump voters pointed to the Trump one that has 1/3, 1/4 as many people in it, because they don't care at the end of the day. They don't care if it's inaccurate. They're driven by a desire to bow down before their great leader.
Yeah. And going back to the sanctuary cities thing, this is, this blather from Trump on it. It's not so easy to do. To strip funding from U.S. cities, it's a good talking point propaganda, again, like John was saying earlier, but you don't just do it. And we talk about the bully pulpit and Obama using the bully pulpit. This takes a little more doing than that, fortunately. But still, it's to hear it coming out of the White House and out of this guy, this president, is ridiculous.
Well, we'll see how Trump uses it, because very rarely has the term bully pulpit been as accurate as when he gets out to address the country.
That's true.
Anyway, we do have to take our first break. When we come back, we're going to get to the story that Michael was referring to. Stephen Bannon's been in the news, which is never a good thing. We're going to respond to that. Hopefully you've been tweeting us at #TYTLive, letting us know what you think about the discussion, about the stories we've been covered. We're going to read some when we come back.
It was...
I know what you're thinking.
I love how you do something with your lips when you play the sound clips.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Look at his
Adam
lips.
is a woman.
No, you're closing your mouth. Usually I'll be like, and I'm like, is he like lip syncing it?
I don't know. I never noticed it until you said it.
It's a funny habit.
It's not human intelligence!
TYT member.
They're kicking me out the door. They're kicking me out the door.
Welcome back to the first hour of the Young Turks Power Panel on Friday, the end of the first week of the Trump administration. We have some great tweets actually referring to that. But first on Davos, I Am Sock says, I think this Davos vote is going to be a new litmus test for having a soul. That's good. I actually think the soul thing, there's other nominees that I think it's more. For this, it's just, she's not qualified. She's not qualified. It's like Ben Carson. They have no qualification.
You know, I tweeted out a while ago when this with Davos was going through that. I've watched an insane number of these confirmation hearings in my life.
Probably around 100.
It's yeah, like that, a lot of them.
Yeah,
and
I saw your tweet.
Oh, and I've never come across anyone like
Davos.
Yes.
Like Davos.
I
Never,
retweeted
ever,
your tweet.
Oh, okay, thank you. But but it's true. I mean, that's what she's measured up against. So wrong for this job.
Yeah, and she sort of, you could tell, she was like smiling when she was answering stuff like, I don't know what
She
I'm
had
doing.
no
Yeah.
idea.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
She just because she just wants to break the system anyway. She knows what she wants
Yeah.
to do going in.
You can break me as long as I get to break this whole thing.
Right.
yeah.
So there was a great, I love this, from Tensai Badger, who has a prediction here that I now am going to go along with. On nominations, if Trump follows the pattern he used for picking cabinet, SCOTUS nominee will be an anarchist who's not even a lawyer or judge. I don't know about the anarchist. I wouldn't put it past him to nominate someone who doesn't have a law degree.
Right.
We'll see.
It's
I
not
don't know.
required. Are
Yeah,
there
it's
any?
not.
Oh,
Are
it
there
could be
any
Ted Cruz. It could be Ted
non-lawyers?
Cruz.
Are there any non-lawyers on the Judiciary Committee now? They usually have one on
don't
there.
know.
I don't know.
But I don't know. If there are,
know.
yeah.
Let's see. Mr. Red Penguin says, I'd rather have a report on what crimes people in Trump's staff commit weekly versus what illegals do. That's actually what my channel, my personal channel at youtube.com/John has become. But also AJ Plus on Facebook.
Personal.
My personal
Yeah,
channel.
my personal
AJ Plus also puts together a great daily rundown of all of the crazy things that have come out of the Trump administration. So go to check that out. And Shane Killingsworth says, I don't always agree with him, but Michael Shore always comes with some good facts. Glad to see you on the panel. Boom. Nothing about me or Jimmy on here, but there's a comment about you.
Isn't that? It's a weird. It's one of these weird Fridays.
Right. Could be
Trust
one
me,
of
if
those-
there was one about me, I'd have read it, but there's nothing.
There's
Nobody
no way that there's not one about you.
I don't see anything. It's curated, so maybe whoever's curating it isn't a big fan of it.
Who's our curator today?
I don't know, actually. Okay. Interesting. They should put their name in here, and I'll know. But back to the news, lots to get to. White House strategist and very high-profile white supremacist Stephen Bannon is no more of a fan of the media than Donald Trump or Spicer is, and that became very clear during an interview that was conducted yesterday. We've got some quotes from it. He said this, the elite media got it dead wrong, 100% dead wrong on the election, calling it a humiliating defeat that they will never wash away, that will always be there. That's why you have no power. You are humiliated. Asked if he was concerned that Mr. Spicer had lost credibility with the news media, Mr. Bannon laughed and said, are you kidding me? We think that's a badge of honor. Questioning his integrity. Are you kidding me? The media has zero integrity, zero intelligence, and no hard work. You're the opposition party, not the Democratic Party. You're the opposition party. The media is the opposition party. And we're going to have some responses from members of that ridiculous, humiliated media soon. But first, we're also part of it. So what do you think about this? That he's not worried about the Democrats. He's worried about the media. They're the ones that he is fighting against.
I think the media needs to start talking respectfully about what a scummy white supremacist turd Steve Bannon is, and then maybe he'll back off.
Maybe. Be nice to him. Be diplomatic. Give him a chance.
Yeah. Why
Maybe.
not? I mean, racists are people too.
So what if he's, I'll say, a Nazi? Who cares?
Well, you know, Eugene Robinson for the Washington Post, who writes the op-eds there, and he's a longtime journalist, covered Washington forever. He said, I'm not going to engage with Steve Bannon on this. I'm not going to respond to him. I'm just going to do my job, and I'm just going to keep being a reporter. And that's kind of what you have to do with people like this. I mean, but it is, you know, people are talking about Goebbels, right? When Bannon was there in the White House, Goebbels that ran the media for the Third Reich at that time, and it's hard when you see the villainization of the media as a whole. In this way, the us versus them, not like you just said, not Democrats, not Republicans, and he goes after just the media like that.
Yeah.
It's pretty eerie. You know, before in 1933, when the Third Reich started, the Third Reich controlled 3% of the 4,700 newspapers in Germany, and at the end, it was way more than half. And that's sort of because they went after the media, they closed media outlets. Not saying anything. I'm just talking about history here, but
Well, net neutrality is in danger for sure.
Right.
So there goes our future potentially.
Well,
Yeah.
look, I think we would be protected by Google and the people at Google love the alt left.
So we're off. You brought us onto this thing. Ajit Pai, right? This guy who
Had the FCC suit.
Yeah.
Or-
Did you read the Forbes article about him?
No.
I have it.
I've read
bookmarked.
rundowns of his.
Do you?
Yes.
Read that article. It makes it seem, and the good writers at Forbes are responsible fact checking, I'm guessing. But I read that article. I had already formed my opinion about Pai and being opposed to net neutrality. And this writer sort of took down every one of those arguments and did it in a very intellectual way. I want to hear what you have to say about it because I found it pretty interesting.
I'll have to read that article.
But no, this definitely worries me. Look, I get the argument that you said, and I saw a couple of journalists sort of saying what he wants is the media to push back, and so that they will look bad, and then the people will oppose them. And it's complicated, and I'm really of two minds on it. On the one hand, I sort of agree with that. On the other, this is a guy who's, not even his implicit mission, his explicit mission now is to delegitimize and destroy the media. Any media that isn't effectively state media for the Trump administration. And when you have net neutrality potentially going away, you have Trump saying we're going to loosen up the libel laws. You see the verbal harassment of journalists in the press corps, the physical harassment of journalists by Lewandowski during the campaign. You see all of this and bringing in these insane conspiracy theorist websites. Some crappy website that Laura Ingraham started got the first question in the press conference. And who knows who could end up there in the near future. I feel like at some point, if you wait too long, you cannot defend one of the necessary pillars of a functioning democracy. I feel like I'm more willing to exaggerate and go too far now than allow it to go to the point where we can't save what might be necessary to help save the larger democracy. Other members of the media did respond, though. In this first video, you're going to see Jake Tapper.
A reminder that the president's top aide just told the New York Times that the press should keep its mouth shut. No.
Ah, Jake.
I like that. Look at him. He's a human there.
He's living up to his porn name. Jake Tapper. That's his real name and his porn name.
Interesting.
Very
Interesting.
rare.
It doesn't very often
He
line
also
up that
grew
way.
up on Tapper Street.
Isn't that
which
crazy?
is-
Really?
Which is weird.
Yeah.
Weird. No, I don't know what you're talking about. Is that a show?
No, your first pet and the street you grew up on is your porn name.
Yeah.
What's yours?
What was it again?
Who's your first pet?
Wiggins.
Wiggins, and then what street did you grow up on?
Marion. Wiggins Marion.
Yeah, that's Wiggins Marion.
D at large.
Oh, my name would be Big Cock Archer Avenue.
That was the weirdest dog in the neighborhood, man.
Just call him Big
But
Cock.
it's a great porn name, right?
You got to
just
see it.
walked right
Yeah,
into it.
you got to see him walking away to get it.
I'm starting to agree with Steve Bannon. The media is the enemy. Anyway, here is Christine Amanpour.
A man poor.
Steve Bannon is playing the role that he set out for himself. There is obviously some kind of strategy here, although it's hard for me to comprehend it because, I operate in the truth and the fact-based universe. But he is playing a strategy which involves creating straw men and women, creating an enemy out of the press, and then, dividing, diverting, obfuscating while other things are going on. That's the only thing I can imagine. Obviously, there are many other, I want to say, totalitarian regimes in the past which use this same kind of strategy. And I mean, if I was going to be funny, I'd say that he's angling for an order of merit from President Sisi, Putin, Erdogan, and all the others. That is how they treat their press. That is what they believe the press should be, a compliant state propaganda unit in the service of the president.
Amanpour, I know. Feel free to attack me in the comments.
Also, Christiane.
Anyway. Really?
Yeah, you went Christine Amanpour. My dad would have done that.
I was just, I don't know.
This Christine Amanpour.
We might be getting distracted unnecessarily, but I agree. It does. It's so many. I tweeted about this, and it just becomes more true with every passing day. Their moves seem like they have some sort of checklist for fascism, and they're just trying to get through as much of it as they can their first month.
That's funny.
I mean, having rocket launchers at the inauguration parade. It's like, you don't have to do that. You could be a fascist in the background and sort of hide it a little bit, but they don't want to. They want goose-stepping.
See, now correct me, I don't know, my theory is that all this stuff is not getting the desired result they want, that it's actually going to hurt them. And exactly why you say it. You do it secretly, your fascism, just like, the mafia, right? So the guy who's out there, I'm in the mafia, I'm going to shoot your head off. That guy you don't have to worry about. It's the guy who doesn't say anything and goes, that's the guy, right? So these guys doing all this stuff, to me it feels like We lost the popular vote. We know we lost the popular vote. We're impotent men in general. And so now we're going to try and do as much ugly shit as we can out in front to show how big our dicks are. But they're not. You're tiny hands. And that's what this seems like. You're trying too hard in a sense. And you should, if you really want to be the ugly guys that you are, you really want to be the fascist you claim, you should do this stuff quietly. Or, that to me would be the smart way to do it. Maybe they're just dumb.
Yeah. Maybe. I don't know.
What do you think, Michael?
I think that they're preying on the dumb, and I think that they're not dumb. But I think what you said is true with the exception of they know that they lost the popular vote. I don't think they've accepted that, and clearly they haven't because Trump was just blaming everybody. And going back to what we were saying about the election, how did 3.5 million people illegally vote, but none of them did in Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania? It just was every place else, right? I mean, that whole notion.
And none for Trump.
And none for Trump, right. And the senators did worse than Clinton did. But you make a very good argument when you talk about the way that it's headed, but I think they are smarter than you give them credit for. Because I think that they're pulling the wool over too many people's eyes, and it doesn't. You can't be that dumb to do that. And I think Bannon's really smart. I mean, but not just because he went to Harvard, and not just because he worked at Goldman Sachs, but because he is somebody who was able to come in, see what people wanted to hear, and out of this candidate, as when he was running for president, and engineer it that way, and just stand in the background and not want the credit. Now that he's out front, it's a little different, but he was in the background, and he was pulling all the strings during the last 2.5 months of that election. It made a difference, too.
Well, if the Trump administration can prove that he won the popular vote, I think it could lead to legislation reversing decades of Donald Trump's dad saying he never loved him.
We'll always be here to remind him that his dad never loved him.
Okay.
Fingers crossed. We'll have to figure out in a couple of decades how Donald Trump Jr. is going to work about that sort of maneuver and reassure himself.
President Donald Trump Jr.
That's right.
Yeah.
You want to get?
Please let it be Ivanka.
You want to get fired like an SNL writer?
Yeah.
That's why I talked about the junior, not the lower one. Anyway, okay, let's move on to. We're running a little bit low on time. Over the past week, the first week of the Trump administration, his behavior has been bizarre in a number of different ways. The things that he chooses to focus on, he went in front of the CIA and started talking endlessly about crowd sizes. He's interviewed by David Muir, and as they're leaving, he brings them over to look at pictures. He apparently called up the Parks Department of D.C. to get them to release photos that make it look bigger. Bizarre behavior, and more information is being leaked out of the Trump administration from aides who are saying that they're very worried about his mental state, that he seems to operate much like a child. You need to coddle him, keep bad information from getting to him. And so that's the information that we're sort of perceiving ourselves and getting from some aides. But apparently it goes higher than that. So reporter Carl Bernstein has been talking with both reporters but also Republican lawmakers in D.C., and he says that this is a growing fear about Trump's stability.
I think there is a subtext here that is unlike anything that I have seen in 50 years of being a reporter. And that is that I am hearing from Republicans, and other reporters are as well, that there is open discussion by members of the President of the United States' own party about his emotional maturity, stability. People are saying his psyche is driving the news cycle, that we are in uncharted territory.
Uncharted territory, that's what it feels like. And yeah, I mean, look, we had how many conversations about temperament during the primary and then during the general election, and that turned out to be pretty important. This is a guy who is willing to spend the first couple of days of his administration talking about crowd size and fighting against the objective reality that his crowds were small, dominated overwhelmingly by past Republican and Democratic presidents, and far overwhelmed by the Women's March. But he refuses to accept those small facts when he could accept them and reach out to people and really shift, I think, a lot of people's views of him. But he chooses not to do that because he is a small person who gets angry when people mock him.
Yeah, and he was talking about crowd size during the election, too, constantly.
Yeah.
So he was petty.
Yeah, that's true.
Everything that we're seeing now, we knew.
It's a continuation.
Exactly. The pettiness was there. The lying was there. The extreme positions were there. And everybody said, oh, when he gets there, he won't do it. Oh, we won't. Yeah. look what he's doing. Look at these executive orders, and it's something people are going to have to get used to. And that's where, going back to where we were bookending this a little bit, that's where senators are saying it's more important to go after him and what he wants to do than it is the people he's putting in. Again, I don't agree, but that's what we have to be hopeful for now. That's all we can be hopeful for.
What we could be hopeful for is kind of what Carl was kind of saying, I think, also, is that, he's making Republicans nervous. It seems like they're just ready to jump. Yeah. Some of them, I'm sure some of them aren't. And because of gerrymandering, it makes it harder for them to jump in the Congress, right? But the senators, they have to run statewide, and so gerrymandering doesn't affect them. But so and this is goddamn the first week. Right?
Right.
This is the first week they're saying this. His numbers are already lower than George Bush after Katrina. I'm saying that, the silver lining and what I said before the election, that this could lead to a progressive resurgence, that the groundwork's being laid by them right now, and it could happen. And we just need the Justice Democrats to step up and do something.
Come on, Justice Democrats, do it.
Come on, Democrats, do something. There are no Justice Democrats there yet, so let the Democrats that are there do it.
Yeah, and so as I've been watching this, obviously, I'm worried about his temperament too and what it could potentially mean. And again, I'll be attacked as saying, you're going too far, you're exaggerating. But again, based on the official procedures that have been described by the military, this is a guy who still, if he wanted to, if he decided to launch a nuclear attack, there are no official things that can stop him from doing that. It might be, and I hope, that the military has some sort of secret precautions against these sort of things. And if you're in the military, feel free to develop those if they don't presently exist. But that's just the worst case scenario. This guy can unilaterally do so much harm, and he can do it as a result of his personal vendettas about slights, either real or perceived. We are now living basically at the whim of a child emperor, and that's a scary place to be in a country with as many weapons as we have. Anyway, let's go on to our last story. Last night, America took one more big step towards normalizing, or I should say renormalizing, torture when President Trump sat down with Sean Hannity. Let's watch.
Waterboarding black sites came up in your interview last night, and I was thinking, if I had an opportunity to speak with David Muir, I'd say, okay, two guys go into your house, they kidnap your child, one guy gets away with your child, you tackle the other guy. That guy knows where your child is. Would you not waterboard that guy?
So waterboarding used to be used because they said it really wasn't torture. It was the one step slightly below torture. That's why waterboarding.
That's why it was legal.
I mean, torture is real torture. Okay, waterboarding is. I'm sure it's not pleasant, but waterboarding was just short of torture. When, all of a sudden they made it torture. So here's the story. Look, I spoke with people the other day who are in this world that we're talking about. They said, absolutely it works. Absolutely. Now, General Mattis said that he doesn't intend to use it. I'm with him all the way. Do I believe it works? Yes, I do.
Well, we actually know it works. I interviewed, there were only 3 people that America waterboarded. One of them was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
Right.
That led us to the Courier, which led us to bin Laden.
That's right.
And I know because I talked to the guy that was running the program at the time.
In my opinion, it works.
They're both lying there. Sean, there's 3 people we waterboarded. And then Donald Trump saying again that when he spoke with the CIA, they told him it absolutely works. We will never know. I do not believe that conversation happened. And he's showed over the past couple of weeks that when he has these closed-door meetings, when he's briefed on information, when he's brought up to speed on things, he will come out and he will lie about what he was told. And we've had previous meetings where the person who was in there with him comes out and says, no, that's not what we said. So either he's interpreting information that fits in with his worldview, or he is willing to come out and lie about national security matters on live TV.
And knowing people, and having those conversations with people who know. I mean, I don't know who any of these people are, right?
I don't even know if a conversation happened.
I remember when he was talking about the Muslim ban in the campaign. He was saying, many of my Muslim friends, he doesn't have any Muslim friends, right? Donald Trump has no Muslim friends. And if he did, many of them would not say, hey, this is a great idea. So when he says I was talking to people about this, I don't believe it. And then when you see what they think of the press, they don't care. He doesn't care about sourcing, right? Because he doesn't have any respect for the proper way of telling a story in that kind of with that kind of gravity.
So one thing, I just want to see what they have to say after the first report comes back that an American soldier has been waterboarded. What are they going to say then? Hey, it's not torture. It's okay.
Just
It's
short
just,
of,
sure, I'm sure
short
it's
of
not
torture.
comfortable. I'm sure it's not pleasant.
Just short of torture.
Just short of torture.
Just short of winning this.
Yeah, so someone should ask, would it be torture if it was done to our troops?
Well, that's exactly what it undoubtedly will happen. It's happened before. We prosecuted Japanese people for it, and so it's happened. Here's a bad thing. Here's another reason why the Justice Democrats need to step up is because we have a torture report that the Senate put together. It took a long time for them to put it together, and it has all the details of who we tortured, when we tortured, who ordered it, who did it, why it doesn't work, how it didn't work. All that information, Barack Obama said, you guys can't read it for 12 years, so we can't see it. So now when Donnie hands Trump, Barack Obama didn't prosecute the people who did the torture, which is what he's supposed to. And when you don't prosecute a crime, it guarantees it will happen again in the future. And that's why Donald Trump is allowed to say stuff like that with Sean Hannity, because there's nobody in jail for doing torture in the first place, because Barack Obama abdicated his responsibility. Not only that, but when the torture report came out, he then sealed it secret. So now, guess what? We can't read it and learn from it. Yeah. And we can't hold it up to Donnie Tanahan's when he wants to go do torture. We don't even have the report because Barack Obama sealed it. Why? To protect fucking war criminals.
I totally agree. We do have to acknowledge that they shut down the programs, though, which is the most important single part. I would have liked the prosecutions as well, but he shut it down while Trump is bringing it back. They also
I guess
they laid out the.
I would say that those kind of half measures is what gave us Trump.
Well, I don't know if I wouldn't call that a half measure. That's what I'm saying.
That's a half
I think
measure.
Shutting down the program and laying out that it is torture, I think, is a very important thing. Now, him being willing to, as he has with Wall Street, trying to cover people's ass and make sure that they don't get prosecuted, that's a big problem. But he did make it illegal. And they went to their 24 thing again, like David Muir. If your kids were kidnapped, well, okay, Sean Hannity, if your wife was frozen in carbonite, would you control guns? It's just fucking ridiculous Fantasyland stuff. But this is a member of the media talking with the president, sketching out episodes from 24 and trying to make national policy based on that. It's ridiculous. But anyway, look, if we could briefly go, I know that we have other stuff we have to get to, but if you could bring up this first graphic, you're going to see sections I pulled out of the Department of the Army Human Intelligence Collector Operations. This is the Army Field Manual we very often have talked about. Waterboarding is very specifically listed on its own bullet point as something that's not allowed, and it's put amongst other forms of torture. If you go on to the next, apparently the Army doesn't know something that Donald Trump does know. You can bring up this next graphic. Use of torture is not only illegal, but it is also a poor technique that yields unreliable results, may damage subsequent collection efforts, and can induce the source to say what he thinks the collector wants to hear. Use of torture can also have many possible negative consequences at national and international levels, like possibly violating national and international laws. I would have added that section. Now, Mattis says that he's not going to do it. God only knows. John McCain said this: "We passed a law prohibiting torture, and it was clear in the congressional record what the intent of the law was. They would have to reverse the intent of the law, which they will not do." And so there are people who are ready to, he says that if they do try to vote on it, it'll be voted down again to try to bring back torture. But this is, he had a primetime interview with Sean Hannity prepping people with the idea that this is not torture. And again, for my final point, I love the logic of, he says, just shy of torture to waterboard, when all throughout the election he said, we're going to waterboard and we're going to do a hell of a lot worse. Well, if it's just shy, then wouldn't that hell of a lot worse go into the torture area? No follow-up questions. Sean Hannity is there to be state-run media, basically.
Yeah, and ironic that after being admonished by Steve Bannon, Donald Trump went and spoke to the media.
Exactly, it's weird. I thought they were the opposition party.
He broke the rule. Like, day one, he broke that rule.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And who are you going to trust on this stuff? John McCain or Donald Trump?
John McCain has been consistent about this, and he speaks, very eloquently and exacting about why it's wrong and what's wrong, and that the people who think that anything is allowable in dark corners where there is no liberty or freedom, that's not what we're about. Yeah. We don't. I think the quote he said was, we don't torture not because of them, but or whatever, I'm going to screw it up.
I don't know what the quote was, but it was a good quote. We're going to find it.
It's not a going to thing. You just did.
We're going to dub it over in post. Don't worry, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Okay, so you had something you want to talk about.
Oh, yeah, we should
talk
about, very quickly, I know we're reading, Emmett Till, a terrible, killing that really many people credit with starting the civil rights movement. He was killed in Money, Mississippi, after having whistled at a white woman at a convenience store.
He's a teenager, right?
He was a teenager, 15 years old, and it was in 1955, which was earlier in the years. In the summer of that December, the Montgomery bus boycotts began, Rosa Parks, and that's really where a lot of people think the civil rights movement hit its stride. But Emmett Till's mother showed his coffin in Chicago, open casket, showed his mutilated face. And we talk about the power of pictures now and then. That's really what kind of changed the whole flow of the civil rights movement, when people saw the brutality that was carried out on this 15-year-old boy. Well, it was done with the testimony in a courtroom of an all-white jury. A 21-year-old woman was allegedly whistled at by Emmett Till, who bought some gum. She went back, told her husband and his brother went out and killed, or his brother-in-law went out and got and killed Emmett Till. Well, the testimony in the trial that took place that summer, this woman, Carolyn Bryant, who was whistled at, who is now 83 years old, gave some testimony that was not heard in front of the jury, but was heard in front of the courtroom, and then entered into the record of the trial, even though the jury didn't hear it, graphically said what this boy did to her and said to her. Now she's recanted. She has said that she didn't do it. Of course, Till is dead. Till's mother died in 2003. Milam and Bryant, who were acquitted of the crime, died earlier, and now today she has said, for a book, that she made up that entire testimony.
Well, I'm glad she'll be prosecuted for lying on her
Well, there
oath.
is a statute of limitations that has expired unless it was murder, and she wasn't one of the murderers. She was causal, and they don't even know where she is now. This interview was taken 10 years ago, and she's kind of disappeared again. She was remarried twice since it happened. Anyway, it's an important story. People should read. There's some great books about it. One is coming out that has her testimony in it. Devery Anderson wrote a book about the murder and how it started the civil rights movement. Yeah. And I think it's important that we talk about that black people have not gotten a fair shake in court yet in America, usually.
Yeah, and obviously what happened, the torture and the murder, wouldn't be acceptable regardless. The fact that she said he whispered something profane at her, I'm sure it incensed the people who heard it. And it's the sort of thing, when you hear about this, you then think, well, in all these other cases where this happened, the numerous, countless other lynchings that happened, was the same sort of thing going on. But regardless, from my point of the testimony, I mean, finding out that after they tortured this guy, they murdered him, they were acquitted in less than 1 hour.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane, the history of our country. But that's a history that a lot of people on the right want you to ignore. Just don't talk about it. Don't talk about it, and it's perhaps lingering consequences.
And there was a white wall in the South. You argue about a blue wall in the rest of the country, and it hasn't been penetrated in a lot of these cases. And when you hear this, man, unbelievable.
Absolutely devastating. Well, thank you for joining me on the show, you guys. We got a second hour coming up very soon. Anna's going to be here. A lot of great stories. Hopefully continue tweeting. I'm going to be reading them as soon as I get off here. But great doing the show with you guys, as always. We'll see you in just a few.
Look, we're doing interviews over there at youtube.com/TYT interviews, and we've done some amazing ones recently. I love this, man. It's one of my favorite parts of the Young Turks.
I mean,
Trump stole your act.
Yeah. I mean, well, he definitely stole the hat stuff.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
my God.
I mean, the hat
fucking
stuff.
Trump.
Yeah, and it's
you
like,
should sue him.
I know, and his hats. If you look at him, I mean, when he talks about rebuilding our country's infrastructure, you look at the poor, low-quality hats that he's made for himself. I mean, you look at this hat. You look at his hats. Don't even have the American flag on it.
All these shows. How are you not on the Brady Bunch? What gives?
Yeah, I don't think I was on the Brady Bunch.
That's an outrage.
I don't know how that happened. I did My Three Sons. I did. I did pretty much every television show in the '70s.
But that was a show about kids, and you were a kid.
And of the 1,600, I think in 26, according to my notes, people that you were party to killing, how many of them were terrorists? Because we're assured by the U.S. government that almost all of them were.
I don't know. I was just told that they were enemies to the United States, and they hated us for our freedoms. They hated us for our religion or whatever excuse that they wanted us to believe. And I just don't know.
And do you think there might have been any kids in that number?
Yeah.
How much do the cops see not just the drug dealers, but the entire community as the enemy?
Always.
Always.
Always. Oh my gosh, that really happens? Of course it happens. Did you think the black community was lying for the last 100 years? Is that what we really thought? We thought they were lying?
You're a Hollywood filmmaker. Why was it important to you to show up at that rally? Why was talking about this important? What in your life, your experience, has made your voice vital or necessary to this movement?
If for the last year and a half, you have been sitting at home and watching seemingly one incident after another of black and brown people unarmed, being shot by the police in extremely questionable ways, and not having the patrol officers, for the most part, facing anything other than internal tribunals. The prosecutor that was involved in the case did not represent Tamir Rice.
Right.
He represented the cop who shot him.
That's right.
And that's just not okay.
You don't get used to being shot at. From the ground, from the air. It's nothing you get used to. So
You flew combat missions.
I
right?
flew 52 combat missions. You know, I remember coming back with the guys that I went over with. We didn't fly every mission together. We were, regrouped from time to time. But we flew most of them together, and we came back together. And it was common knowledge before we flew back that all the GIs were leaping out of the plane and kissing the earth. You know. And I remember we couldn't wait for the plane to land and jump down and kiss America.
And I genuinely believe that there's not a conspiracy going on. So I got into this believing that if we could rally people, we would be allowed to at least make a case. And I hold on to that naive belief, because how do you get up in the morning?
We need a political revolution. And I'm beginning to see the seeds of that developing in this campaign, where working class people and young people begin to understand that it is imperative that they participate in the political process and that they demand a government which represents all of us, not just the few. So that's what we have got to do. I can't do it as president alone. We need that mass movement.
Well, the DNC is not going to turn around and love Bernie. In spite of however, fabulous he may be doing, he's going to be pushed back against. So he's very unlikely. He's not the first great Democratic candidate to raise these issues. And while these rebels make a valiant stand inside the Democratic Party, the party keeps marching to the right over the decades.
It's a pleasure to be with rebels. I like that.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Young Turks, all new Power Panel.
Power Panel!
We're about to have a lot of fun, report a little bit of disastrous news and also a little bit of good news. So,
then I'm happy and sad.
Yeah. Anna Kasparian, Hassan Piker, Brett Ehrlich. We're here, we're ready to do it. We're ready to have some fun.
And at the end, a choreographed dance in 6 parts.
Before we get started, I would
Yes.
like to tell everyone that's watching currently, I wanted to thank you publicly for giving me a chicken pot pie today for 2 reasons. One, because I was very hungry and I didn't have time to eat. But most importantly, you reminded me that pot pies are amazing.
Yeah, so
It's a great form of consumption.
John and I will buy huge packs of frozen Marie Callender's chicken pot pies because
Very good.
sometimes the day gets so crazy that we don't have time to go get lunch. So having that in the freezer is a good option for when we're desperate. But they're so bad for you. Like they're so full of sodium.
Any frozen food
I mean,
is jam-packed with sodium.
That's true.
Yeah.
And it's a cream carb bomb.
It's
It's full of cream. It's made of carbs and full of cream.
It's only 600 calories though, which is
Per serving.
By the way,
oh shit, I hope not. Oh my
Like
god. if
they're-
it's
no,
like they're
it's
meeting
the
out little
one
tiny
pie-
slices
One
of-
pie is like 620 calories.
Yeah.
And which is terrible for me because I'm not supposed to consume the 2,000 calories, like because I'm smaller than most people.
What are you, a bird?
So-
Yeah, you do. You still
No,
need...
no, no.
You
no,
just run while
based
you're
on
eating.
based on my height and my size and the fact that I'm a woman, I'm actually not supposed to eat 2,000 calories.
How
That
many
would gain weight.
calories?
I think it's 16 to 1,700.
That is insanely low.
Yeah.
Oh God, how do you live?
I don't understand
I
that.
don't know.
That's impossible.
It kind of sucks.
I
but
don't
whatever.
like meat pies. Ever
That's
since
3
Titus
Big Macs.
Andronicus.
Anyway,
They're made of
I don't think
children.
the audience cares about what we're talking
I
about.
thought
right?
Why not? I thought
we
they
don't
were
have a
here for-
lot of material to get through today.
We do. We actually have a lot of material. But before I get to that material, I just want to encourage everyone to check me out on Instagram. Anna Kasparian Official is my username. So go ahead and follow me if you'd like to see some fun pictures. Now, with that said, a quick live read regarding members. Post-game is going to be awesome. Jake and I are not going to do the post-game for today. It's actually pre-recorded by Gigi Manukian, Irma Brito, Asher Caulfield. I didn't know that was Asher's last name. And
I thought it was Roth.
That's a
Good
powerful
reference.
name.
Good early
Yeah.
2000s reference.
Yeah. Okay, so what did they talk about?
From Mickey Avalon.
A Dutch satirist, tourist, does a video of the Netherlands welcoming Trump.
Great.
All right.
That sounds freaking awesome.
Yo,
Growing up bilingual, which, we were talking about earlier, and then experiences from the Women's March, Steve's attempt at giving us love advice.
I can't wait for that.
Oh,
There's the
Jesus
one.
Christ.
That's the clincher.
Don't take
you know
Steve
what's
O's
good?
advice.
Just neg her the whole time. Steve-O. I just want to know what his love advice
no,
is.
but to be perfectly honest, his wife is dope. And like
His wife is amazing.
yeah, his wife is like a superwoman. So like he did something right.
Yes,
so I kind of
yes.
would listen.
But like the way he pitches it, like he doesn't believe it. That's what I'm trying to get at. Is like he doesn't actually believe it. So I want to see his actual advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is fascinating. Okay, so let's move on to some of the news stories today because there are a few doozies. Nearly a week after the Women's March, which took place in many major cities throughout the country, thousands of women and men got together to march in a pro-life protest in D.C. Now, this is an annual protest that takes place, and for the first time ever, the vice president decided to show up and speak to the crowd. Now, I want to give you some more details on what the people who went to this protest want specifically, but before I do so, let's hear from our vice president, Mike Pence.
Our Supreme Court turned away from the first of these timeless ideals. But today, 3 generations hence, because of all of you and the many thousands who stand with us in marches like this all across the nation, life is winning again in America.
So, look, as you read into the story and you read into what conservatives want and what Mike Pence and Donald Trump are likely to do, it is very worrying for those who want to protect reproductive rights. But let me give you some more details. So Mike Pence apparently promised that President Trump would not only end federal funding for abortions and abortion providers, he would name a Supreme Court justice who would, quote, uphold the God-given liberties enshrined in the Constitution. So I'm going to stop for a second and give you some details about what's not accurate in that statement. So first of all, federal money, taxpayer money, does not go toward abortions. In fact, there's something known as the Hyde Amendment, which literally bans that from happening. So it's usually a talking point that you hear from Republican or conservative lawmakers, and they intentionally use that type of language to mislead you, to think that if you are someone who has some moral issue with reproductive rights, well, you should be worried because your taxpayer money is going to abortions. It is not. Now, does some of that money go to organizations that provide abortion as one of the many things they do? Yes. However, that money is not allowed to be used for abortion specifically, and organizations like Planned Parenthood get audited on a regular basis just to ensure that our taxpayer money doesn't go toward abortion. So I want to be clear about that. Let me give you more details. Now, Donald Trump, of course, tweeted after these protests took place, and he said, the March for Life is so important. To all of you marching, you have my full support.
Shouldn't he be using the president's, the POTUS Twitter account at this point?
No, they lock him out during daylight hours. They lock him out. Twilight hours. No, twilight hours.
Yeah.
Whenever the vampires can go around, that's when he's locked out. He's crepuscular.
I don't know what that word means, but you just showed your Stanford degree right there.
I learned that from Archer.
Oh, really?
The little cat thing is crepuscular. He's crepuscular, and they shoot at him. But yes, that's the thing. It's so weird. It's so weird. This is exactly the kind of thing that he would tweet out from his own personal account. It's very weird.
What my favorite part about this is the so blatant, so apparent irony whenever a Republican congressman or a vice president or the president, Donald Trump, comes out and says, man, we're so pro-life, we're on board with life, except, I mean, not to restate a cliche, but Republicans don't really give a shit about you once you're out of the womb, apparently. Because, like, right up to that point, they're like, oh my God, we need to preserve these values. We need to make sure that, you know, babies are not dying left and right because Hillary Clinton wanted to abort fetuses the day before the pregnancy was, you know, the day before the baby was about to pop out, basically. But then, once the baby's out, fuck them.
This is very selective tea leaf reading. That's what happens after elections. Very selective tea leaf reading. Essentially, what he's trying to say is at the end of the election, having Donald Trump win the election, that means that the mandate of the pro-life movement is so strong that the entire nation is behind him. Now, what it is everyone's job to do is to point out how ridiculous that is. The Marist poll that just recently came out said that, you know, the only subsection, the only generation that favors pro-life over pro-choice is people 69 and over.
Right.
Now, the rest of the country and just a straight-up majority of living, breathing human beings believe in the pro-choice movement.
So I'll give you even more numbers on that, because there have been various polls that kind of look into this issue, and conservatives would have you believe that the majority of Americans are actually against reproductive rights, but that is not the case. Now, Quinnipiac, which is not known to be a liberal organization whatsoever, did a poll. This is one of the more recent polls that happened. And what they found was that 70% of voters agree with the Supreme Court's 1973 ruling in Roe v. Wade, which essentially legalized abortion in the country. 70%. And so what you saw in the Women's March was, not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of women. No, wait, no, millions. It was 2.9 million, right? Or
millions.
Something. Yeah,
750 in Los Angeles alone was the estimation.
So I was thinking about the Los Angeles protest alone.
I think you were thinking about Trump's inauguration speech when you said tens of thousands.
Probably.
That's what happened,
Probably. It's hard to remember all these numbers.
Yeah, go ahead.
But okay, so the reason why I'm bringing the Women's March back into this story is because you literally had millions of men and women marching to protect all sorts of things, but reproductive rights were among the many things, right? Funny enough, there were, of course, lots of different chants, like my body, my choice was one of them. And then people would stop chanting after a while because it kind of gets repetitive. And so we came up with a chant, and it was, don't be a wussy, power to the pussy. And no one wanted to chant with us. But anyway, sorry for that side note.
I think that's pretty good.
It is good, it's fun, it's powerful.
Don't be I was afraid to say pussy later, and I changed it to wuss instead of puss.
Yeah.
Because I was afraid, but now I'm very empowered.
Now
Thank you.
you're
At least no one chanted along with you, but I support you.
So those protests were gigantic. This one, there was a decent turnout. A couple thousand people got together to voice their opinion. But
there are dozens of us.
But
dozens.
the difference,
there
let me finish my point. But what you see there is honestly like a symbol of what's happening in the country when it comes to this debate, right? You have the Women's March with millions of people wanting to protect reproductive rights, and then you have the pro-life movement, or I like to call anti-choice movement, and you have a way, way smaller group of people. And here's the thing. Your religious morals are fine as long as you don't allow those, or we don't have a system of government that dictates our lives based on one group's religious morals.
Right, I get it, but there's still like an implicit moral code in the law. And so these people are saying, regardless of my religious belief, I believe that life begins at conception, whatever. The fact is, it's legal to do all the stuff that Planned Parenthood does. And if you look at Pence's statement, it is very carefully worded. It's trying to get a wedge in and separate it. He said, I don't want, Trump is the first person who says we're going to make it illegal for federal money to go to abortion, which, as Anna points out, has already happened. The next thing he says is, and abortion providers. And that's where he's trying to get in.
Yes.
And these are, Planned Parenthood, what is it, like 97% of what they do is women's health oriented.
Yes.
Just things like pap smears and general health care for women who can't find it anywhere else. Here's the problem. If you eliminate the funding to Planned Parenthood, it's going to be harder for women in general to find the kind of health care they need, especially when the next looming initiative that Trump has laid out for America is
defunding
to
Obamacare.
defund and, replace, if we have time, Obamacare.
Yeah, it's not even about having time. They don't really have an interest in replacing Obamacare. They haven't shared any ideas. The only idea that they have shared was, oh, maybe we will have some of these health savings accounts that'll be pre-taxed. And yeah.
Good luck affording one of those.
Yeah, that's not a healthcare plan, and it's certainly not robust. And so, look, I'm concerned because the Trump administration has been clear that they don't really care about public opinion that much. They keep moving forward with ideas that are actually incredibly unpopular. And look, right now, he has the ability to nominate a Supreme Court justice who will be extremely conservative. And he's been clear about the fact that he will choose someone just based on that alone, right?
He keeps saying it's going to resemble Antonin Scalia.
But it won't. It won't resemble Antonin Scalia.
It'll be worse.
The difference between Antonin Scalia, I was talking to some lawyers, the difference between Antonin Scalia and this entire list of potential Trump nominees is Scalia was like a scholar and a geek. Like, he was a funny, super smart person, and disagree with his, conclusions and methods if you want, but at least he was like really into law. A lot of these folks are political climbers. They're the Mayor Carcetti of whatever they are from The Wire. But like just angling to make the friendly decisions that, ingratiates them with the people who are eventually going to be making Supreme Court nominations. And that's what's so troubling. Because he'll say it's Antonin Scalia because to the, uninformed observer, another Antonin Scalia is just another conservative judge. But you won't have that kind of person with the passion for the law that he had, God rest his soul.
I absolutely agree with you. I did not agree with every ruling that Antonin Scalia made, but there was at least some level of ethical behavior.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like in his dissenting opinions, there was a lot of conflicting statements specifically regarding the LGBT issue where he wasn't as much as a constructionist, I guess. Right? That's the term for it?
I'm just saying, you're going to have a dumb idiot as a Supreme Court justice who isn't even going to, draw on enough, references to the law.
All I'm saying is, in the grand scheme of things, okay? In the grand scheme of things, if you had let's say Hillary Clinton is president and she appointed a dumb idiot that was more progressive, and eventually more progressive laws were passed, we wouldn't be sitting here we'd be like, that's a dumb idiot, but at least there's some progress being made. Maybe this dumb idiot won't be like mega conservative and is just a climber, so their opinion could be changed.
Okay, so let me tell you what else is going on, state by state, because there's obviously some push for a federal ban on abortions, but different states are doing more to restrict abortion. So Congress, this has something to do with the federal level as well. Congress has already begun moving anti-abortion legislation. On Tuesday, the House approved a bill sponsored by Representative Chris Smith of New Jersey that would prohibit using subsidies or tax credits provided through the Affordable Care Act to buy health insurance that covers abortion. So stop that for a second. It's not, you would use those tax credits to pay for your abortion. You're not allowed to use those tax credits toward an insurer that covers abortion. So think about that. Think about what their arguments were when President Barack Obama was trying to get Obamacare approved. Look, he wants to get in between you and your doctor. This is, government overreach. We can't have that. But they just want to tell you what you can spend your money on or what you can spend your tax credits on and what insurance is okay and what insurance isn't okay. It's insane. So let me give you more. So the representative who wants this signed into law, said the House would next take up legislation sponsored by Representative Trent Franks of Arizona to ban abortion after the fetus is able to feel pain, which advocates say happens 20 weeks after fertilization. So that is something that we've seen done on a state level, and now our members of Congress want to do it on a federal level. So I'm concerned because you have places like Texas that have already severely restricted abortion, and now they're going to go much further on the federal level.
Unconstitutionally so, up to this point at least.
Up to this point.
We'll see what happens with the new Supreme Court justice. But see, look, okay, Brett, you're a much smarter person than me.
Yes,
I want to ask you this question. Maybe you have a better answer for it. I just simply do not understand why, like, what the financial or otherwise incentives that Republican congressmen might have as far as restricting reproductive services. Like, if we know that it's an unpopular thing, why are they so adamant about getting this across? Is it simply to just make it seem like they're doing something?
I don't know in each individual one. I think it's part of any given conservative person's coalition is a pro-life arm, and so paying back to them. It's also an applause line. It seems pretty clearly within the platform. And there's a large proportion of the population that is in favor of restrictions on abortion.
Okay.
You know, and that goes anything from not 8 months in, that's a restriction on abortion. And I think a lot of reasonable people look at it and say, whether you agree with them or not, I think there's a lot of reasonable people who say there should be some restriction on abortion, but that's a conversation to have after the Supreme Court has said, listen, you can't make it illegal.
Right. All right, well, that's what's happening when it comes to reproductive rights. I guess we'll see how the story develops. Moving on to Obamacare. It turns out that some leaders in the GOP and even some physicians who voted for Donald Trump want to fight tooth and nail to ensure that we do not completely repeal Obamacare. Now that's interesting considering the fact that these are individuals who either supported or voted for Donald Trump. So did they really know what they were getting themselves into? So we'll get to the physicians in a second, but before I talk to you about the Republican governors who are fighting to keep Obamacare in place, I just want to note that a lot of these physicians did not think that Donald Trump was going to go after Obamacare. They thought that he was just campaigning with that promise and he was acting like any politician would and that he wouldn't really follow through on some of the more extreme policy ideas. Well, they're obviously very surprised now. So among the Republican governors who want to protect Obamacare, you have John Kasich. Now, John Kasich was among the more reasonable members of the GOP that were running in this past election. And he thinks, look, the expansion of Medicare has been very, very helpful to people in my state, and I want to make sure that we protect that. There's also Rick Snyder, and here's what he had to say. Well, Rick Snyder is one of 16 Republican governors in states that have expanded Medicaid in their states, even though the Supreme Court ruled it wasn't mandatory under Obamacare. And by the way, let me clarify a mistake I made earlier. This is about Medicaid, not Medicare. So the expansion of Medicaid was not only popular, it saved a lot of lives. And there have been cases of people who, CNN, profiled the story of this woman who had a baseball-sized tumor, brain tumor, and she was told by her doctor that that was the case, and she's like, I don't have the money to pay for this. I gotta work. It is what it is. And they found out that she would be covered under Medicaid because of Obamacare, and they removed the tumor, and she's doing fine now. So there are all these stories throughout all these states, including states that have these, Republican governors. Also, Brian Sandoval of Nevada and Gary Herbert of Utah want to protect Obamacare.
Here's why it's absolutely ridiculous that that certain states decided not to expand their Medicaid coverage, because it was 100% funded by the federal government. They were going to do it until 2020, and then in 2020, the projections were that they would fund still 90% of it. So literally, if your state didn't expand Medicaid enrollment, that is only because your congressperson, your governor, did not like Barack Obama or did not like that policy and wanted to try to get it to fail.
Yep.
That is so selfish. It blows my mind.
Regardless, I mean, that aside, you still look at the implication here, which is within Obamacare, there was a state choice. Like, it's a state choice. And it seems like the Supreme Court was like, you got to leave it open. But it is a state choice. Their decision to do what they will with that money. And that's what's frustrating. Yeah, my argument here is like, eventually there might be like a repeal and replace of Obamacare. And if that happens, my biggest fear is the ability to declare some kind of weird victory for doing it and replacing it with something that ends up just being like a bad solution, but it reduces premiums for the average person. So what they're going to do is they're going to get, as much as people, and there's going to be a lag in between. You're going to have your new coverage, and you're going to pay less for it a month. But it is going to be crappy coverage that doesn't cover a catastrophic brain tumor.
I do not believe for a second, I mean, I could be wrong, right? But I don't believe for a second that premiums are going to decrease. Why would they? I mean, think about it. I hated the idea of the mandate because of the fact that it was what I guess, some of the more establishment Democrats felt would be a replacement for universal health care. What I mean by that is universal health care or a public option would provide a much more affordable option for people, right? And so Obama's reasoning was, well, if you have a federal mandate and you force everyone, including healthy individuals, to buy insurance, that'll keep premiums low. But there were no real cost caps. So it was a huge handout to private industry, and they're like, we can do whatever we want.
That's precisely why they allowed for pre-existing conditions, even though they fought tooth and nail.
Yes.
They, in the end, were like, all right, whatever. And then we saw that
Let me finish my
point.
point.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. I just want to get to the premiums and why I don't think they're going to decrease. You get rid of the mandate, which is one of the things that Republicans hate the most, and I understand the anger toward that. But okay, what do you think insurance companies are going to do? They don't have healthy people paying into the system anymore because they don't have to, and they don't have to worry about a tax penalty. And then there's still insurance companies that are doing it for money. They're doing it for greedy reasons, not out of the kindness of their own hearts. So they're not going to be like, oh, we're not making as much money because these people aren't forced to buy our insurance. And so we're just going to up the premium of the people who are buying the insurance because they need it and they have to have it. So I think it's actually going to be more expensive. I don't know.
I think there was one mandate that still they could cap it for individuals in need or like individuals over a certain age that really need it, because they obviously foresaw that the insurance providers would do that when they realized that healthy people just simply are not going. Healthy people are simply just not going to sign on and pay the government instead. But then there's so much shady shit going on with that too, where you see certain, like the insurance provider pulling out, Aetna, I think, is that how you say it? Aetna, pulling out of certain markets, claiming that they're simply not making enough money, and then further investigation showing that that's not the case at all, and they were just trying to bully the government.
They were bullying the government because they wanted to merge with a different health insurance company, and of course, because of antitrust laws, they weren't able to do that. And so they kind of wanted to sock it to the Obama administration, and the way they did it was they claimed that they dropped out because, Obamacare was too expensive, they couldn't afford it.
And I'm on the other end of that, where I feel like what I'm terrified by, and Brett kind of mentioned this a little bit, is that because everyone was so adamant about making sure Obamacare failed, like these selfish, Republican mostly, obviously, congressmen, like they wanted Obamacare to fail so that they could just say, look, Democrats suck, Obama sucked, this legacy is bullshit, just for that specific political reason, right? And not only, like my fear is that after a period of time has passed, we're going to look back at this and go, see, obviously socialized medicine could never happen in the United States. As soon as we tried to do it, it didn't work, it failed. It didn't fail because the government didn't plan enough. It was actually cost efficient. It was lower, like it cost government lower. It was actually making money technically. When you look at it, but it doesn't matter. They tried to make it fail, and they still are, and eventually they'll use this so that they can go back to the private industry marketplaces where they figure out the pricing, and then we'll never have national health care.
This is the sad thing. It's like dealing with a child. That's the problem with Trump, and the way this leaves it so that the state governors are going to have to take up a fight against Trump.
Yeah.
And it's very strange because it seems like, look at what he's doing with the wall, the weird way that he's trying to justify the way Mexico can end up paying for the wall is if we levy a tax against imported goods which eventually will raise the price, so it's actually American consumers paying for the wall.
Right.
But it's this weird calculus of declaring victory. That's what he does. And so with this, maybe he'll just peel back Obamacare, put a new sticker on the same thing and say that he won somehow.
Who knows?
We'll see. This is what's so frustrating for me is like that's a best case scenario. Is him just like oddly declaring victory and all the smart people who know what's going on just going like, way to go, buddy. You pulled a fast one on everyone. Yeah. At least it's staying the same. But the sad part is as time progresses, like all the best case scenarios that I had going into like coming out of election night, like the best case scenario for me is like he just builds up some infrastructure and gets some deals for his buddies that'll end up paying back for Trump Industries down the line, and he just leaves everything else alone. That is very clearly not the case anymore.
That's what I thought too. I was like, oh, nothing is gonna change, like favoritism for just Trump's friends instead of whoever the other president was going to be. But no, we are really heading down a dark, super nationalistic path. I don't know where the hell it's gonna end up.
So let's talk a little bit about the physicians who voted for Trump. Now, understand that there have been lots of physicians who had issues with Obamacare. They've been vocal about it. However, there is a significant amount of physicians who voted for Donald Trump and do not want him to repeal Obamacare. So these are researchers, David Grande and Craig Pollock, and they found that just 38% of primary care doctors who voted for Trump want him to repeal Obamacare. The rest do not support getting rid of the health care law, which is interesting. So let's take a look at this graph that they put together. I think it's super helpful. By the way, these are researchers from the University of Pennsylvania. And so these are primary care physicians who support the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. And 32% of them are Republican, 0% of them are Democrats, 15% overall. Only 15% of primary care physicians support repealing the Affordable Care Act, which is kind of fascinating, especially because you would always hear from doctors in the news about how terrible Obamacare is, right? Because like, oh, well, it's a doctor, he would know, she would know. And only 15% of them want to repeal it. So when it comes to Trump voters, 38%, and when it comes to Clinton voters, 0% want to repeal the Affordable Care Act.
Well, you know why, right? Sorry, not to cut you off, but because a lot of doctors that were criticizing Obamacare were like, how do you say it? Estheticians. Like,
anesthesiologists?
No, not anesthesiologists. No, like people that, plastic surgeons, for example.
Right.
Because Obamacare had a very controversial aspect to it where it was going to be there would be a performance-based payout system for doctors, and that was controversial amongst doctors that don't do anything that improves the quality of life of individuals. So that was controversial, and I understand why, but that's why primary care physicians would probably still be like, wait a minute, if more people are covered, more people will be able to come and
and get the preventative
these people
care
have
that they
coverage.
need.
These people have coverage. They're not going to emergency rooms.
Yeah, that's a great point.
They have. I know where my check is coming from. It's coming from the insurance provider, which people have now.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty straight.
Almost
that's
20
the
million more.
Simplest explanation.
So I do want to comment just very quickly on the number of people who voted for Trump and they knowingly voted against their own interests, which I think is so fascinating. You see it with so many Trump voters. You see it with these physicians. I mean, these are doctors, you know, they're the best and brightest in our communities. And I mean, it's not like Donald Trump didn't constantly talk about repealing Obamacare. He did. And, you know, there were a few quotes from these physicians in this piece, and they were just like, well, we just didn't think he was going to do it.
Yeah, and the other aspect is like you think of your average doctor as of a higher income bracket. What they're voting on as part of their identity is not their employment, but rather the other side tax breaks that they're looking forward to.
Yeah.
So I think that factors into it more, and that's what's so frustrating because, you know, again, going into this election, we have more information than we've ever had at our fingertips. We just don't know what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
Well, and also one other note. I don't know if you're going to end this topic yet, but I did extensive coverage on the ACA, which is why I'm going to rattle this number off. But off the top of my head,
867-5309.
No. I think the majority of people they didn't appreciate Obamacare, right? It was unpopular in the end of the day when you look at it as Obamacare. Yet 74% of the people polled, the same people, wanted all the specific mandates.
Right.
It was all about the name used during the polling. So if the polling specified the healthcare, policy as Obamacare.
26-year-olds being able to be under their parents' insurance.
So they loved the specific parts of Obamacare that they were polled on, but once you just call it Obamacare, they would poll lower. We did stories on that as well.
It's just Obamacare versus, the Affordable Care Act. They want the Affordable Care Act, and that's why you see Price going after it, calling like the Patient Care Initiative or the Patient Option, as opposed to what it will be called, price gouging.
Yeah, look, I think
Hashtag price gouging.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a sobering moment for a lot of Americans, and they could either learn from it or they could continue to bash people who try to present evidence and facts to them. I'm very curious to see if Donald Trump decides to really push for that 20% tax on Mexican imports. If he does it, I'm very curious to see how Americans respond to the massive inflation that we're going to have to deal with. I'm curious to see what happens when they do repeal and probably not even replace Obamacare. Let's go. Let's have at it. This is what you voted for, right?
Look, if they touch my guacamole, I'm gonna fucking revolt. All right?
I've seen it happen. People have tried to touch his guacamole and he's torn arms off.
Believe
I don't
me,
appreciate that I have to pay
guacamole is
extra.
the last thing you're gonna care
I don't
about.
appreciate that I have to pay extra for guacamole at Chipotle to begin with, and now it's going to be extra, and that is something that genuinely concerns me. And also, I tweeted about this already, but like all of you millennials that didn't go out and vote, fuck you. This is your fault.
All right.
Hashtag fuck you. Hashtag Haas's guacamole. Hashtag Haas avocados.
All right. Let's take a break. When we come back, we do have a heartwarming story for you, so stick around for that and more.
Here's how we prove we're too strong. We're up for a shorty again. Let's crush the competition. We're actually up for 2 awards. Best News and Media, of course, and Best Overall YouTube Presence. Ooh, I'll shake your lawn. PewDiePie, we're coming for you. Okay, I don't know if he's nominated. Anyway, let's go win it. It'll annoy our competition. Those guys go, oh, yeah, no, but we're bigger or something. I mean, we don't have the numbers, but we can maybe. Well, how come we win the shorties, the streamies, and the webbies every year? By the way, it's not because of us, it's because of you guys. You're too strong. Let's go crush them. How you vote, you go into the description box below. You've got all the links there. We also made it tinyurl.com/TYTShorty2017. You could bother typing that in if you don't want to go to the links below and just click it. And you know what? You can vote every single day. So you can't vote more than twice a day. I don't want any voter fraud, okay? But you can vote every day. Let's go win those 2 shorties. Best overall YouTube presence, Washington. Go.
Welcome back to Hour 2. I don't know what's going on with the iPad, so I can't read the tweets.
I have some.
Do it. Someone's very angry at me for doing a shameless plug of my Instagram. By the way, if you watch the show regularly, you know I never plug any of my social media. I just did it as an inside joke.
Wait,
And
is
also
your
follow
Instagram
her.
at Brett Ehrlich? Is
No,
your
it's
Instagram
okay. I don't
at
care.
Brett Ehrlich?
I think her Instagram is at Hassan D. Piker.
Is that what it is?
Hold on.
Yeah, that's what
so
it is.
right
Well, you
before
might as
we
well
went
follow
live, I
both
feel
of
like I
those.
have to explain myself now. I feel guilty. So before we went live, Haas, who's obsessed with how many followers he has, was like bragging or something.
You guys should
And
follow
so-
me.
Anyway, so when we
putting that out
started
there.
the show, I did that to like get on his nerves as an inside joke.
I
Anyway,
think it's
sorry.
I think it's
It was
funny.
funny because it did get Haas. It got a reaction off
I mean, I
camera.
thought it was great. I laughed.
Someone got mad at me for that.
Yeah, why?
I don't know. It's okay.
You should follow her anyway. She's
No,
fucking awesome.
no.
You're following the show because you love Anna. Obviously,
Steve-o.
fucking follow her on
Let's
Instagram.
stop talking about this. Okay, let's read some other tweets, please.
Okay.
Go ahead. Did you
I
have
was going to
one?
say Steve-O threw some shade at I think it was Jank on Jimmy Dore, but that was yesterday. Sorry.
Okay.
Is that the tweet you were gonna read?
It's just like pegged at the top.
Oh,
So.
it's like, hey, I got a tweet from like last week. I saw it was pretty funny.
You wanna
Not
know what the
related to
first
what's going
tweet
on
was.
right now, but
Sorry, I messed
Oh,
up.
by
I know
the way,
Bitchy Gay Guy said.
Hold on. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Bitchy Gay Guy said, I don't know what's tastier, Haas avocados or Hassan the Hun. Let's go. Follow me at Instagram.
Okay,
He's
so I have a
delicious.
serious tweet from Mahari, and he actually makes a really great point, and I want to clarify something that we said during the Affordable Care Act story. So he writes, Republicans don't hate the mandate. It's part of the plan. It's a part of their plan. Okay, so I said that they hate it, and what I meant to say is they don't genuinely hate the mandate. The mandate is a huge handout to private insurance companies. They actually love it. I mean, it was modeled after Mitt Romney's plan in Massachusetts, right? So it's a Republican idea, but they pretend like they hate it. That's the thing that they railed against over and over again in the mainstream media in order to sell to the American people that the Affordable Care Act was terrible and we shouldn't like it and this and that. But in reality, don't get it twisted. They do love the handout to private insurance companies.
On a similar note, Michael Gibb tweets,
Mm-hmm.
piece of advice to Brett, don't use, quote, Haas avocados. The word avocado is from the Aztec aguatl, which means testicle. So I was always wondering because it's aguacate in Spanish. and it's like that's why it's guacamole, but we call it avocados.
Deported.
Deported, straight up deported.
I just deported you.
I spoke, but that's amazing. I will now never look at a avocado again.
You'll never look at it.
But it's
again.
weird that you would be like, do you want a testicle? Like, I'm not going to do that. Just come up with a new word,
It looks like a ball sack, if you think about it. Like a very large ball, one testicle.
So I get Lance Armstrong's
it kind of looks like
ball sack.
I was going to plug my own penis on there.
Yeah,
But
all
never mind.
right.
Please don't.
Let's move on to some news. You guys ready?
Plug your own penis. That sounds so painful.
I know.
How would you pee? TYT Live.
Okay. We have a heartwarming story for you guys. Generally, I'm not a big fan of stories regarding tips and receipts. A lot of times these stories go viral. A lot of times these stories end up being fake. However, there was a heartwarming story involving a black waitress who was working in D.C. when a group of white men in trucker hats came in, and it was pretty soon after the inauguration. So she knew they were out of town, and she knew that they were likely there for the inauguration because they voted for Trump. Now, Rosalind Harris, this waitress, was kind to them. She works at Busboys and Poets. And apparently, when they sat down, they asked a few questions about that establishment, that restaurant. And they're like, well, what is it named after? What's going on? They asked her about the restaurant, which is named after Langston Hughes, an African-American poet who wrote moving literature about black identity in America.
His birth name was Busboy Poet.
Yeah. So, wait.
No, I made that up.
Dude, you can't fake news all over the live show.
Sorry.
Fake news.
It was a joke. That's the old version of fake
Man,
news.
you pulled
Continue.
a Spicer.
Continue.
So, so she answered their question, and they had like a lovely conversation. She waits on them, and then they quietly leave. So then, all of a sudden, she goes to pick up the receipt and realizes there's a long note on it, and she kind of freaks out. She's like, "Oh God, what did they write?" And here's what it said: "We may come from different cultures and may disagree on certain issues, but if everyone would share their smile and their kindness like your beautiful smile, our country will come together as one people, not race, not gender, just American." And then Jason White, who wrote that message, also left a pretty generous tip of $450. And now that $450 tip was, of course, a reference to Donald Trump, who's our 45th president. And it was an interesting statement. Apparently, neither one of them wanted this to be in the media. They didn't want it to go viral, but one of the other employees took a photo of it, posted it on social media, and that's how it went viral, and they're kind of like uncomfortable with it. But Jason White was then interviewed by the Washington Post about this, and he said, "It's really our duty to make America great ourselves, not one person, but ourselves. And that's by respecting and loving one another no matter how much we disagree with them." Okay, so I have a lot of thoughts about this. First of all, you know, I think Jason White is a great person. I obviously don't agree with him on political issues, and that's fine. And I like that he was generous. I like that he left that sweet note on the receipt, and cool, okay? But what I want to focus on a little more is this notion that, oh, we all got to love each other. Like what you hear from some Trump supporters, we're like, oh, we all got to love each other. You know, we all got to accept each other. We got to make America great again together. It's just really hard to hear that coming from people who voted for a guy who advocated for punching people in the face, talked about grabbing women by the pussy, made fun of someone's disability during a rally. Like all of those things don't just go away because someone got elected as the president of the United States. Donald Trump is still that person. And even now, after he's been elected, he continues to attack people who criticize him, and he does it ruthlessly. And so talking about loving one another is great, but think about who we just elected as our leader.
Yeah, and I think what goes through people's mind is probably, all right, of the stuff Trump said, I think this one thing's important to me. I think he's stupid otherwise. I still like individuals. Yes, I'm not justifying anybody's actions. I'm just kind of explaining them. In the same way earlier today we talked about physicians voting for probably their pocketbook and not necessarily the Obamacare initiative to repeal and replace. So I think that's it. When I first saw this, I hated this story.
Yeah.
Because the first time, this is better. The follow-up story makes me feel a lot better. But the initial headline was like, not about race, but a black woman got money from a white dude. And the fact that at the end,
that is the title.
That's really what it was. It was
such
pretty
a
much
stupid
that
title.
on the nose. So and it's not about race. That was weird to me. It made me feel gross. It felt weird that there was a transaction of like, also here's $450. Like, ugh.
Yeah.
If it was without money and like a normal standard tip, that'd be fine.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how I feel about the tip part, but I totally see your point. For me, what struck a nerve was this notion of we all need to love each other when we have such a divisive person as our leader. And so, by the way, I agree. I agree with the notion that just because you disagree with someone politically, it doesn't mean that you have to hate them, right? However, I think that sometimes there's bounds of reason, and people's political views say a lot about who they are as people, right? So if you and I disagree on what is and isn't considered life, right? The moment of conception, I do not consider that life, right? It's not a viable human being outside the womb. It's fine, we can have that disagreement. But if you believe that a woman's place is in the kitchen, it goes further than just a disagreement for me, right? Because that's you telling me that you believe I'm a second-class citizen who shouldn't have the same rights as you. If you believe, as politicians in Russia believe, that beating your wife is not a crime, well, that says something about who you are as a person. Okay, so I only touched on women's issues here, but there's also income inequality issues and things like that, right? So if you think that we should deregulate every corporation and allow them to hoard all the money that they make and not do the patriotic thing of giving back to their country and providing opportunities for other people, I think that says something about who you are, okay?
Yeah, but the thing is, like, for me, as soon as I read this, I was like, it kind of reinforced that belief I always had, which is that not every single, and this might be a shocker for some of you, but not every single person that voted for Trump was voting because they were secretly racist. And for a lot of people, that's an unpopular thing to say. This was a message that was pushed by mainstream media over and over again, like all Trump voters are racist. We even covered it because we were looking at polling data, and it was very hard not to believe that. But the reality is, for a lot of people, specifically people that had the privilege to do so, could essentially look at the things that Donald Trump was saying and decide, you know what, he's just kind of saying that. It's not a big deal. Overall, the economic aspect of it, overall, the message of change, it resonates with me. That's why a lot of people voted for Donald Trump. That's what I thought when I saw this article. Now, I don't know, you guys might disagree with me.
Yeah,
I want to hear your perspective.
I think
on
for
it.
someone like Jason White, yeah, he probably did vote for Trump for the economic reasons. I don't know. I don't know who Jason White is personally. But yes, there were people who felt like, the income inequality and was so bad that they had been forgotten. And by the way, those are legitimate concerns.
Yeah.
And when you have a career politician and you have an established politician running against someone who claims to be a populist, claims to be anti-establishment, well, who looks better if you've been frustrated with
no
our current
track
system?
record, too.
With no track record,
Yeah.
exactly. So, I understand the people who ended up voting for Trump because they were so sick and tired of the way things were going. But I also understood that you need an actual idea. You need an actual plan from this person who says he's going to change things.
The vote for Trump, I understand why they did it. I still think every vote for him was so crazy. Like, every single one of them was absolutely crazy. Just because, I don't know, the closest thing to what I believe about Trump
not if
is...
you're like a racist coal miner.
Right, I
There's
understand.
like
It's the same
12
thing.
of them, but like they were probably
that goes to understanding what I understand what they were thinking.
Yeah.
I understand that. I can wrap my mind around it.
Yeah.
I think it's freaking crazy. But I think the closest thing to me is what Seth MacFarlane wrote, which is just like, people in LA and New York, we know this kind of person. We created him. We created the rich dude who came into money and then tried to play the business market and then tried to come to television and lie to your face with these weird ass pitches that try to make something sound awesome when really it's just a sack of snake oil. Like, we know that, and that's why everyone saw through it. It wasn't because we're like bleeding heart liberals. It's just like, this guy doesn't pass the sniff test.
Yeah.
I don't know. I also think the BS part about this is the idea of this woman looking at this at this receipt and noticing first that there was a long, note, and not the
Instead
fact
of
that
the
there's a
tip.
giant $450
Yeah.
tip. The other thing is, I think it's kind of racist to assume that they don't believe the same things politically just because she's black and from D.C.
No, wait, but hold
Wow.
on. It wasn't just that. It was the
Facts.
environment that they were in, right? So it's,
What do you mean?
So the restaurant, it stands out because there's it's kind of like a museum, the way it is.
Right, so artists can't be conservative, Anna. Is
Pretty
that
much,
what you're
yeah,
saying?
that's what I'm
Oh,
saying.
crap.
Yeah.
I know when he's gonna.
Oh, I was
push
gonna
a
be
contrarian
so happy.
position
I
just
know.
because, his voice changes.
It does. It's just so see-through.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
still like Anna, even though she seems to be wrong right
Okay. I'm going to skip ahead to the final story
Good,
because
good, good.
it's amazing. Okay. Public policy polling looked at a number of issues that Trump voters feel passionately about and passionately against. And one of the things that they were asked in this survey was, do you think it's acceptable for Donald Trump to use a private email server? Now, if anyone was living under a rock or happened to forget, during the election, Hillary Clinton was criticized over and over and over and over again for the fact that she used a private email server. People were outraged. They were so outraged that they felt like she needs to be locked up over it, right? So
Wasn't that a promise of Donald Trump as well?
it was. But
Weird.
look, he has actually followed through on a lot of his more hideous promises.
Right.
So I'm actually happy that he didn't go after Hillary Clinton. Now, and by the way, he's very busy with very serious investigations regarding inauguration crowd sizes and
Voter fraud. Voter fraud.
voter fraud by
Bigger than it
millions of
looks.
undocumented immigrants.
And also, Steve Bannon wants to shut down the Fourth Estate, essentially.
Yes. So anyway, but let's get back to the private email server issue. Of Trump's voters, how many of them, what percentage feel that it would be acceptable or okay for him to use a private email server? Amazing. The poll stated that 42% of Trump voters think he should be allowed to have a private email server, to just 39% who think he shouldn't be allowed to. I just thought that was interesting. Discuss.
There was a New York Times article recently, probably yesterday, that said there was a study, and they wanted to see how much people believed fake news. So and how much they saw. So that what they did is they showed them three kinds of things. They showed them real news, fake news, and then as a placebo equivalent, fake news.
What does that mean?
So what they did is they said, here is the story that actually ran that was fake news. Was there, there was a sex ring under a pizza parlor in D.C. and, Pope Francis.
As for real news, you mean that they ran that for real news?
Just for the sake of everybody understanding and following, Haas is joking. So they showed actual fake news titles and asked people, do you remember seeing this and do you remember believing this? And just as many, and then they also showed them ones that they just made up for the sake of the study that had never run anywhere on the internet, just the brainchild of some weirdo in a lab. And the same amount of people believed that they had seen and believed the fake news as remember seeing and believing the stuff that they just made up as fake news that never ran, which is reflective of this study in that people are gonna believe what they want to believe.
Yeah.
And if you ask them questions, they'll just file it away into the thing that backs up their argument, whether they've thought through it or not, or feel that they need to justify to you any part of their thought process along the way.
I disagree kind of
Bring
with
it.
you. I think that this is the same concept as Obamacare versus the Affordable Care Act. I think that people are just unaware.
It's the same,
I think people just think Donald Trump pushed this narrative that Hillary Clinton was a crook the entire time. She's a criminal. She needs to be punished. Look how she's rich. She gets away with all these things. Ironically, he was also rich, but whatever.
Yeah.
And people didn't put two and two together. Oh, is this that important of an issue? Did she really, did she compromise national security? Now, some people in the intelligence community do agree with that. They think that Hillary Clinton did compromise national security. They do think that she should have been punished, and it's kind of messed up that lower level people get way larger punishments. We talked about that extensively as well. But I don't think people are putting two and two together. I think that these people that supported Donald Trump and thought Hillary Clinton was a crook and voted for Donald Trump because of it are not aware that that was the nuance, that was the reason why she was labeled as a criminal.
I think people also really discount the fact that all of the things that she got criticized for, in a lot of cases rightfully so, didn't really matter. People just really hated Hillary Clinton.
Right.
Right? The DNC completely discounted that. People despised her. And even if they knew nothing about her policy ideas or what she did wrong in the past, she came off as a robot who was misleading and who was a liar, right? It was amazing because when it came to the debates between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton wasn't honest 100% of the time. There were times when she was misleading as well. However, Donald Trump lied much more than Hillary Clinton did. And PolitiFact, Snopes, all of those different fact-checking websites have the numbers for you if you want to look into that and if you don't believe me. But what was so interesting is Donald Trump came across as someone more trustworthy, right? And so I think that kind of stuff plays a much bigger role in what
There
happened.
were some interviews I saw where people say they know he's not telling the truth, but some of the questions in a lot of those polls were an overlap of, does he tell the truth or does he just speak his mind?
Mm-hmm.
He is honestly saying what's in his mind, and that resonates with a lot of people.
He doesn't seem
He
calculating
honestly says what's in his mind, but most of the stuff in his mind is dishonest.
Yeah.
And that's the weird rub.
That's such a great, yes, that is a great distinction.
It's pathological lying, by the way.
Yeah.
That's being a pathological liar, because that's you believing and the insane things that are coming out of your mouth, and the ultimate conclusion of saying stuff to see if you can get away with it. Also, the conclusions of this study are in line with something that he himself said, which was, I could stand, let him do whatever he wants, or I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot someone and no one would get mad at me. That's what this is. This is, you can do something illegal because it's you, and I'll let you do what you want. Shake up the establishment, drain the swamp, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's annoying.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, he is following through on a lot of his hideous promises, but draining the swamp is not one of the promises that he
congressional
followed
term
through on.
limits? What happened there? I thought that was a big policy position.
Yeah.
He even said at the rally, it was an amazing moment, not at the rally, but at the retreat, the conservative congressional retreat that he spoke at 2 days ago, when it was amazing. People laughed at all the shit he was saying.
Yeah.
It was nuts.
All right, guys. Well, that does it for the news today, the news for this week at TYT, but I'm sure that lots of other things are going to happen over the weekend, so check us out on Facebook, Facebook.com/The Young Turks. But lots of live videos throughout the weekend, including some from our on-the-field reporters. So,
Yeah.
All
and
right.
follow me at Anna Kasparian.
Me too, at Anna Kasparian.
Okay. Brett Ehrlich, Hassan Piker, Anna Kasparian. We'll see you guys next week.